human resources, human capital, people, and culture. This single vocation has many names. HR professionals are responsible for what is arguably the most critical success factor within any organization. It's talent. HR Studio Podcast brings you interviews from HR and industry thought leaders so you can listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates. To learn more about our sponsor, please visit ajoconnor.com and be sure to check out the AJO blog for additional HR learning tools and resources.
Welcome, everyone, to HR Studio Podcast. I'm Linda Halavic, and I'll be your host. It's no secret that today's workplace can be described as nothing less than demanding, extremely fast-paced, almost frenetic, and constantly changing. All of these dynamics leave employees and leaders struggling with the daily frustrations of content overload, high levels of stress associated with changing priorities, and with the anxiety of trying to fit 10 pounds of work in a 5-pound bag, if you will. Well, our guest today, Dr. Joshua Ehrlich, is a leading authority on succeeding in demanding environments. He is at the heart of helping leaders and employees to manage these dynamics. He's done research at Yale and NYU and has written a book called MindShifting, Focus for Performance. Welcome, Dr. Ehrlich, to HR Studio.
Thank you so much, Linda. Good to be with you.
Let's jump right into it, if I may. How did you get involved in this field of study, Dr. Ehrlich?
So I found graduate school rather stressful myself. And so I came to this from a personal level of how do I help myself stay sane and clear through graduate school. And then when I started my consulting career, really about 20 years ago, working with executives from leading companies in New York, what I found is that the same things I'd learned for myself around mindfulness really helped my clients tremendously to be more effective and productive. So that's really the start of it as a personal passion and then really seeing the value for my clients.
Yep, understood. And I do know that in your book, the word mindfulness, well, it's kind of fundamental to your approach to helping leaders improve their performance in these tough environments. How do you define mindfulness? And can you talk to us a little bit about kind of how you landed there, what it means, and how you use that?
Yeah. So mindfulness is essentially a synonym for focused, present, and engaged attention. So it really means showing up with all of ourselves. And basically the way I use it to help leaders is to help them show up. Because as you mentioned, there's all these reasons why we don't. There's all these distractions, even just physical. Have we taken care of ourselves physically that day before we go into a meeting? Are we all there? And so mindfulness is a way of paying attention to those cues so that we can be all there and really listen well, really help our employees, influence our colleagues, do all the things we want to do as an inspiring leader, which we can't do if we're distracted and not really clear mentally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as an author and a researcher, you're also a practitioner. You coach huge high-level leaders, and lots of them. How prevalent do you find mindfulness? Or when you talk with your clients about it, it's kind of an aha moment and you know, a big learning for people.
Right. It's actually been a tremendous shift in the awareness of this topic. So 20 years ago when I used the word, I had to be very careful. People would say that I'm woo-woo, you know, and really out there, and some people I just would never bring it up. Now when I come and speak to audiences or coach individuals, really, it's about 75% or more that have heard the term, have had some access or some, you know, exposure to a yoga class or some experience of this. And so I'm not the first voice. There's a tremendous amount of popular media attention on the topic, tremendous amount of research. And so it's really nice now not to be kind of feeling like preaching into the wilderness, but actually to be called on and to be asked to talk about this.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. A lot of people believe that in these hectic work environments, all they need to do is work harder. Longer hours, take on more, and just kind of work harder. Mindfulness, though, as I've understood it from your research and readings, is not that. How is it that mindfulness can actually help a leader be more productive and literally fit kind of 10 pounds of work in a 5-pound bag, perhaps?
And so that's exactly right, Linda. We're all pressured to do more and faster. And so what we end up doing is we push ourselves harder, which ends up making us freeze and less open and less effective at learning. But also, it makes us multitask, right? So the temptation is always, even just as I'm talking to you, what's going on my phone? What's going on in my email? And so can we turn off our screens, turn off our phones when we're in a conversation and simply be in that conversation, one conversation at a time? What we forget, and the research is very clear on this, is all of us think we're great multitaskers. Everybody thinks they're above average at multitasking. In reality, we all stink, right? In reality, it takes us twice as long and we take 40% longer and we make twice as many errors. So we'd like to forget that. We're in this kind of self-delusion that we can be more effective by going faster, by doing more things at once. But we have to remember that, right? 40% longer, twice as many errors. How much is that worth in your business to make a mistake? If you think about that cost, that can sometimes help. But it's all about doing one thing at a time well, as opposed to 20 things badly.
It's great advice, and I'm sure very difficult for leaders and employees today to do that easily. Do you find that it's hard for people to learn how to be more mindful in their approach to their work? Can you talk a little bit about what you find?
Yeah, it's very hard because the habit and everybody around us is running faster, right? And so what we have to do is find little practical ways to do this, right? One simple way that I teach is the 45-minute meeting. You don't even call that mindfulness. You call that effective meeting practice. But instead of having the 60-minute back-to-back meeting frenzy, can we actually stop at 45 minutes, take a break, right? Check our email, use the bathroom, God forbid, right? Take a breath, and then enter the next meeting with some clarity of purpose and intention, as opposed to just, I'm running breathless from the last meeting. We know what happens then. We show up and we wing it, as opposed to being really planful and effective. And so that's just good meeting practice, but it's a good habit to get into. It helps us to show up.
And I have to say, your research is based in psychological as well as physiological research. So what you espouse, it does work. And I guess I'm wondering if there are some other tips maybe that you'd be interested in sharing with our audience. And of course, hopefully that will encourage them to read your book, MindShifting, Focus on Performance, because it is important to try to gain some control. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you espouse. So yeah, what other tips might you have for our audience, Dr. Ehrlich?
So, absolutely. So another thing that I think is really central is using our breath, right? So we can be attentive and mindful of our breathing, not controlling it, but just using it as a barometer of our basic level of awareness, presence, and stress. So how are you breathing right now, Linda? Just check in with your belly. Notice, are you breathing kind of shallow and up here, or are you breathing diaphragmatically and from deep down? And if you just notice it, paying attention mindfully, you breathe right. So just paying attention, it changes, right? You don't have to intend to do anything. You just pay attention and things change. Habits change just by paying attention to them. And isn't that a miracle? Just noticing your breath, it slows and deepens on its own. And you can do that anytime you can remember it, right? So this is the hard thing, is remembering to do it. One CEO that I work with, he takes a minute of silence before every executive team meeting. He doesn't call it mindfulness, and not everybody breathes or doesn't, but he says, I'm just going to check my agenda and take a minute. And so everybody gets clear on why they're there and what they want to do. And some people breathe mindfully, who I've worked with, but it's just a moment to not fall into the meeting, racing and running, but actually do it more effectively. So that's a really important practice is just breathing. And we think about mindful breathing as meditation, but it's very important to realize mindfulness does not mean meditation. Meditation is a great way to practice mindfulness, but it's really a focused way to do that. We can be mindful and need to be mindful in all sorts of ways, walking down the hall from one meeting to another. There's another great practice. Just being aware of your steps and your breath as you walk from one meeting to the next, and clear your head, right? Okay, I can leave that last meeting behind and really get ready for the next meeting. So breath and, meeting practices are a huge thing because we're at so many back-to-back meetings and, often we're online and in video conferences and there, as I said before, another great practice is just turn off your screen. If you don't need to be looking at a PowerPoint or something, can you just not be distracted by the constant stream that's coming in? You turn that off and I have a window, I can look out my window, but, a way to not be distracted and have that habit be pulled out.
Yeah, so those are great. You've shared at least 3 or 4 tips there. I appreciate that very much. What are, what are some of the takeaways or the main headline either that our audience would get by reading MindShifting, your book? What are the other takeaways? And we'll kind of close on that because I think it's a great book and I encourage folks to pick it up.
Thank you so much, Linda. So the basic takeaway is that we can be more effective when we lead and we show up completely. And what does that mean? That means showing up with our bodies, our minds, our emotion, right? And therefore we can connect with other people, right? If we fully show up with all of that, then we can form a connection. We can listen more mindfully with a clear head. And mindful listening is a huge practice that I talk about in the book and teach because we're in conversations all the time. And the biggest sin I see of leadership is not listening, right? We have the next thing already prepared to say. We're racing on to our agenda. We want to push things to get things done, and we haven't figured out where is the other person coming from. So if we can listen first, we can form a connection. You and I, Linda, can form a relationship because I've listened to you and showed up fully. Then, once I form that relationship, I can take you on a journey. I can influence you. I can inspire you. But if I try to influence and inspire before I've shown up and connected, it's a disaster, right? You feel manipulated. You don't want, right? So the essence of really good leadership is, as I said, showing up fully, clearing away the distractions, and then being able to form a really strong, deep relationship by listening and thinking about what the other person's agenda is before we try to take people on a journey. So that's the primary takeaway.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Ehrlich, for this high-level overview of your book and some great learnings and tips that are clearly founded in your research. Again, I encourage everybody in our listening audience today to look up Dr. Ehrlich online and to take a read of his book. It is terrific. Thank you very much, Dr. Ehrlich. Have a great day.
You too, Linda. Thank you so much. Be well.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. To download the show notes and discover additional information from this week's episode, please visit hrstudiopodcast.com. To join the conversation, we invite you to visit our LinkedIn group, where you will connect with a growing community of current and future HR leaders.